Okay.
It says on YouTube now, which is good.
Yes, sharing. I'm sharing the new link.
On YouTube now, which is good.
Yes, I'm sharing. See, I'm duplicating. Okay, here's the link. All right, this is the new link. And we are live on YouTube with this new link.
Yeah, this is working.
Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah, we have a new link since the first one was not connecting to Zoom. Is this okay now?
Yeah. It works.
So can you post a comment on the old link?
Yes, yes, we'll do. I'll do that. We'll put the comment there.
Yeah.
I'll post it on Twitter anyway.
Is this one on?
Yes, it is.
All right, this is the new link. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So, oh, and this. Yes, this one is live. We can know this is live now. So, to quickly move on, we can start by introduction. Are we seeing that? Ankit, Michael, Santosh, is that one working?
Yeah.
Oh, it's working. Okay, let me while I go on to edit the previous link and also try to announce our new link. I want Michael to go on, but let me quickly do the introduction. Welcome everybody, and we can move on. Okay, so welcome to Angular panel. We've moved to a new link. My name is Hassan Sani. I am the founder of NG Abuja, a contributor to Angular, and a member of Angular Nigeria. This is a panel where we want to have experts across Angular to come on board and give you answer your questions. That we all have burning questions about Angular: how to manage size, how to deploy, and how to use subscriptions with RxJS. We have 3 experts on our call today, and they all will be giving you breakdown answers and live questions you may have right now to any Angular question you have. Michelle, Santosh, and Ankit are all well experts on this field. Please, I will give them the chance to introduce themselves and also tell us a little about how far they've gone with Angular. I want to start with Michelle, or Mickey. I don't know if that name was correct.
It's hard to pronounce. My name is Michiel Kikkert. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm basically a full-time Angular developer, only doing fairly large apps for enterprise. Usually I do internal apps, so there's not many apps that you can look at that I made because they're just not online. I've been a freelancer for the past almost 15 years, of which I started about, I think, 8 years ago with AngularJS. And as soon as Angular 2.0 alpha came out, I completely switched to the new Angular. So yeah, I'm doing this for my daily bread, basically. Coding Angular almost every day. Love the framework, and also love to teach others to, well, use Angular. They call me the Angular evangelists here in my office here. So On Twitter, you can follow me, Dutch_guy. My DMs are open. If you have technical Angular questions, you can always drop me a note there and I'll try to assist. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Michel. That's an interesting one. Opus, that's you being the freelancer, which is a lot. Why is interesting? A lot of us here are actually freelancers, and that would mean a lot for us from learning from you. Thank you very much. Santosh, please.
Yeah, I think Ankit can go ahead. We are going in sequence, right? So, let,
Sure, Santosh. Thank
yeah.
you for giving me chance.
Arre.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. My name is Ankit. I am based out in Hyderabad, India, and I am a full stack developer. I have almost 6 years of experience in Microsoft technologies, and I currently am working with ADP as senior software engineer, and I work in Angular, ASP.NET, and also some part on SQL Server also. I am working on Angular 4 and above since almost 3 years, last 3 years, since the time Angular 4 was released. And I am also a technical author and blogger. I have published a book on Blazor, which is a UI framework by Microsoft. I am writing a book on Angular and Firebase, which is going to be published next week. And I am also a GD for Angular and web technologies. And I am happy to help. And thanks to Hassan for inviting me for this panel. And you can follow me on Twitter on Ankit Sharma _007. You can post your questions. I'm happy to help. And let's see how this panel goes on. I'm excited about this.
Thank you very much, Ankit. Thank you very much. That's interesting. I would really be happy to learn more about your book and as it published. Thank you very much, Santosh.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah,
Yeah, hey everyone. So my name is Santosh Yadav, and I'm from Pune, India. I'm one of the Google developer expert for Angular and web technologies. Uh, I love to contribute to open source, so I am a contributor for Angular and GRX, and I have also created few tools. So if you're interested, you can go to my GitHub repository, and you can just look at the projects. My GitHub username is Santosh Yadav 198613. So you can go there and find some interesting projects to work on. Apart from that, I love to write as well. So I keep writing for indep.dev. So we have published more than 10 blog posts in last 1 year. And yeah, this is it about me. So excited to be here. Thanks Hassan for organizing this AMA.
Thank you, Santosh. Thank you, everyone. We will now move on to a little about your. We interestingly we have with us here a freelancer, an author, and a passionate developer. This means that it's all covered. It's all covered. If you are on the freelancer part, we have someone here. If you are on the authorship or books you've read, we have the author here, and also a passionate developer here. All where it's a full room, and I myself will be here to give you any question that you may ask as a newbie or on how to get to this expert. So first question, I want us to jump straight to the questions, if that's okay. Before we do that,
yes, we can directly jump to the questions.
okay, okay. So, all right. So on the first question, I want us to undo is where we have looking at. So this is more like a newbie question. The user is asking, the individual is asking about the skills that are in demand before he can move. He can start with TypeScript and basically Angular. Now, why I feel this question is interesting, because most newbies used to ask, okay, do I need to learn TypeScript as a whole language before I start Angular, or what level of JavaScript should I be before I start Angular? And that's why I want us to look at this before look at this as a first question. Usually I would say if any of us have that chance to move on, but I want to give this to Michael as he he is on the freelance, and I believe we can go with that.
Can you repeat the question, Hassan?
So the question is the skills. That's the skills, the JavaScript skills from on TypeScript and mostly in Angular. Basically, what type of skills should this person have before going on with using Angular or learning Angular?
Right. So everything in Angular is TypeScript, right? However, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. And having a good understanding of JavaScript will definitely help you in starting with Angular. But having said that, I mean, having any kind of programming skills will help. It doesn't necessarily have to be JavaScript. For example, I have trained a lot of C# developers, and C# developers actually feel really at home in TypeScript. I'm not entirely sure because I'm not a C# developer, but it kind of makes sense because TypeScript is a Microsoft product and so is C#. So it looks really familiar to C# developers, for example. But I mean, I always say, make sure you have at least a basic understanding of JavaScript. Having a good, solid foundation in JavaScript will definitely help you in solving more complex problems in Angular. So take it step by step. If you are completely new in programming, make sure you do basic tutorials in JavaScript first before you dive into Angular. After you do the basic tutorials in JavaScript, make sure you do some tutorials in TypeScript. Even if you have the basics, you understand the basics, you understand the syntax, that will really help you at least understand the introduction Angular tutorials that you're going to follow after that, right? And if you're a bit further into development, make sure you start looking at RxJS, reactive programming, which is also a pretty important concept in Angular. So yeah, I mean, having good JavaScript skills will help you, but you don't have to be a JavaScript expert to you don't have to do that first before you can start in Angular. Just get the basics right, do a few basic JavaScript tutorials, then move to Angular basic tutorials, and that will get you quite far.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And the one you actually answered a lot about this question. It's also said why and all those things, and this is a breakdown. Basically, from what I got, get the basic of programming as a general, get understanding of JavaScript, then move on to TypeScript, and then try to work with Angular. And also, you mentioned that most C# developers that you have trained get around TypeScript quickly. Maybe because C# and TypeScript, C# is a static typing, and also TypeScript is trying to adopt that for JavaScript. Yeah.
Yes.
So if that's all, I want us to move on to the next question, which is about now this I want it's a best practice to minimize the production bundle size in Angular. So best practice, Santosh, I want you to take this, but this is now talking about optimization and how to get the best performance for Angular on production level.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, Mikhail and Ankit also have something to add here, but I will start. So I have been like creating a large applications from last 3 years, and this is the biggest problem which we have, right? How to decide how to optimize the bundles, right? So the first thing is try to break your applications into the small libraries. I've seen a lot of applications where what people do is whenever they want to share some components or library or services internally, right? So they end up creating shared modules. Now, shared modules was some concept which was available in Angular 4, and it was the part of documentation. So a lot of people actually ended up creating a lot of shared modules, and then they started importing shared modules everywhere. And that is one of the major reason a lot of people get into this issue. The bundle size is more. So I would suggest try to move on to the libraries. Libraries are like really smaller, tree stackable. So you don't have to, you will, most probably you will not face the issue. You can just import what you need rather than creating a shared module and importing everything every time. So that's one thing which we have. I also have seen people using Lodash, Deep Dash. So those libraries, right? Of course, they are really helpful, and they are like part of your daily code. But try to use the ES modules. If you go to Lodash or Deep Dash, they also have ES modules available, which uh, can help you to reduce your bundle size by more than 100 KB. I did it for my current project where we had Lodash, but we were not using the ES module, and I ended up removing the Lodash and replaced it with ES module, and it reduced my bundle size by 100 KB. And similar practice or similar approach I have taken for shared modules. I removed all the shared modules, and I ended up saving more than 500 KB in that as well, because we have around 60 to 70 modules, and every module had shared module imported, even though we are actually using one or two components maybe. And another thing is, before you move into production, see what is going into the production, right? And how you can do that. So there are tools available. One of the tool which I love is uh, which actually Igor posted last month during one of the meetups, and then he talked about the same tool during ngconf. So it's uh, let me just tell you, source map explorer. And just to ease the developer's life, right? So I created another builder which you can just use. It's called ngx builder slash analyze, and we are actually adding some more features to it. You can just install it and run ng analyze command to see how much bundle size you have, and which component or which you can say the module is adding how much kilobytes to your production build, right? So that is also important. I will share the link in chat in a few minutes, but I'm sure this is one of the widely or mostly talked topics. So I think Ankit and Michael might have something to add. So
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
I would like to add one thing in Santosh's answer. I think we should also implement the lazy loading of module, which will make our initial loading faster. So that is one of the things which I would like to add. And also, while using any third-party packages, you should make sure that they are optimum. There are a lot of third-party packages which are very heavy, and when you add it to your project, you are just using one feature from that, and then but you are importing everything from that third-party package, and it is adding load to your application. So while using any third-party project, you should think: do I really need that, or is there any workaround which I can implement manually and decrease the load of my application? So these 2 points I would like to Santosh answers. Michael, if you have anything, we can also add that.
Exactly. So if you choose your third-party NPM packages, you're supporting bundles basically, make sure they are at least 3 shakeable bundles, right? So there's a huge difference. For example, if you need a lot of date processing, which I do, I used to use Moment.js for that, but Moment.js is not 3 shakeable. So you import the entire thing, even though you only might use a couple of functions, right? So now I use datefns, which is a lot more efficient and resulting in really smaller bundle sizes. Also, well, besides what Ankit said, right, when it makes sense, use lazy loaded modules for deeper stuff in your site, right? So stuff that's not visited directly, lazy loaded. It's so easy to lazy load stuff. Also, which is a bit of an underutilized way of optimizing your build, I think. Be very careful how you set up your styling. If you use external styling libraries like Bootstrap, maybe they can become really large because you import the entire thing at once, right? So instead of using the CSS bootstrap import, use the individual SCSS files that also come with Bootstrap 4. Because styling is often, in my experience, sometimes 30 or 40% of the entire bundle size. It's if you do it incorrectly, right? So make sure you import styling at the right places. I always use global styling because it's much easier to prune, right? And use things like purge CSS when you can in your build process to actually make your packages smaller. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you. That was truly insightful, and that was an interesting question because I saw we all got to chip something in, and that's really, really, really an amazing feeling there. So I will move on to the next question, which is that's quickly, which goes to say to ask if, and this is also on a beginner level. He said the question is okay. So we have say okay, cool. Okay, the question is the major use of zone and method like run aside. So the question is based on zone. That's now this is more of looking at how to use the zone package that comes with Angular and method like run outside Angular. Okay, this is quite interesting. Okay, it says major use. Okay, this is an interesting, not too much of clear question there. So I'm just going to move to the next one. How much depth of knowledge should require to industry perspective? What about okay? Do I need to? Okay, so if we go to this one, say the question here is how well is sorry, my okay. Okay, this is more of using now going in depth to working with Angular as a whole. He asked here, say, how to extend a component. Now, still, I said it was still. I was looking for a question that still relates to a beginner aspect, and this question was how to extend. No, let me to rephrase that. His question is how do you extend to a component? That's not. I'm guessing he's trying to say how do you extend another component to a component? Maybe using say you want to use you want to use two different components extending your properties to from one component to another. I'm sure I got that right. Am I still mute? Because I
no,
see
we can hear you.
Oh, okay, no, I was done.
So
yeah, I was
we were
done.
just trying to
oh, you wanted me to clear that more?
No, it's fine. I think.
Okay.
We understand the question.
Yeah, actually, this question seems a bit confusing to me. Like, what do you mean by extend and component?
I mean, so I think Mikhail, maybe you can answer.
Well, I mean, so suppose you have Angular component A and Angular component B, and there is some stuff in Angular component B that you want to use in Angular component A. Can you then say, okay, Angular component A extends Angular component B? Technically, you can. I never do that, right? There is a lot of strange effects you get. For example, the lifecycle methods in the extended object no longer work. You get a lot of strange side effects if you try to extend a class that's decorated with component with another class that's decorated with component. So extending components with reusable methods is possible. I mean, you can easily do an extend on your component class, but my advice would be, and that's from my experience, maybe Santosh or Ankit have a different opinion on that, but my advice would be do this only for functions that are fairly pure and can also be static functions. So, so you don't actually want instance functions in your superclass, right? So if you have simple helper functions and you put that in a class because you need them in multiple components, it's not a problem to extend on that class. But I would definitely advise against extending an Angular component with another Angular component. It's usually a sign that there's a code smell going on somewhere, because it usually means that you are better in offloading that stuff to a service and just DIing that service in your components instead of trying to reuse thing in a component. Because in theory, right, the Angular component is just used to connect services and inputs with a view. So they're not meant to be extended. But that's an opinion thing, maybe. I've seen it done, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mikhail. Actually, what you said is correct. It should be act as a connector for services and view, not to be meant for extended. And if you want to share something, you can always use services, or you can use input or output properties. So there are ways to services data from component 1 to component 2. So instead of extending the component, you can use services which are readily available, and then you can easily share data.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, just to give you an advanced scenario where actually I have done it once for my earlier project, where we had a framework and we wanted to give the functionality where actually the developers who are using my framework can also add his own framework to my framework. I mean, you got it. What I'm trying to say. It's like I have few components, but in case you want to create a new component and want to place inside my container, which is not given to you, but you want to just use somehow, and you want to create a new component and inside put it inside my framework. So what we ended up doing is, rather than uh, developers going ahead and trying to figure out how it is done, we actually created a base component which had all the properties, all the input properties which we are using internally, and we ended up exposing it as a public component, public API. And now whenever a new developer comes in and he says, okay, these are 7 8 components you already have, but I want to create a new component and I want to be placed this component inside the framework, which we actually generally don't open for everyone. But that was the scenario where we ended up using base component, or we extended a component, and then you can just extend that component, and you have access to all the properties methods which you need to implement, and you can just place it inside our container.
Yeah, that
So that was
scenario.
really a
Yeah.
but
It can make
really
sense.
complex.
Yeah.
So that's why I think Mikhail was saying don't do that.
This
Try to avoid it.
I must say this is another interesting question, because I can see we are all now throwing amazing tips out there on how to really make the code better, performance better, and all those things. And even on the chat, if you notice on the YouTube chat, some people are also giving us an interesting insight on how to make. And one thing is the thing about Angular and development as a whole. Every aspect is a valid as far as you're comfortable with it, and you can see this is why we have these experts in front of us and giving us a better way to do these things. It's all interesting, and I really appreciate all of you. I'm going to move on to another interesting question, which um which now which now give okay. So why is this question an interesting one? It's something that I've also come across myself. This question is talking about how to migrate an Angular JS to Angular 9. Interesting, because I have tried to migrate from Angular 8 to 9. which is really really interesting. It's no hassle, no too much work, no too much pain. But now this question is about JS to Angular 9. I feel it's should be again. I think I'm going to go on to try and let somebody you guys take on this because okay, let me give this to Ankit. Please, is there something you want to chip in on this?
Actually, I have never tried this. I
Okay.
would like to get some insight from Santosh or Mikhail on this
Okay,
because
okay.
yeah,
Please.
actually, I have never worked on Angular JS. I started
Oh,
with Angular 4. Yeah, I have never worked on Angular JS. I
eh,
started with Angular 4 and then yeah.
wow, interesting. Thank you very much. But Michelle has worked with Angular JS.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I still have about 10 applications now in maintenance that are still AngularJS,
Wow.
which we are currently one by one rebuilding in Angular. So we've looked at the possibilities and the logic of actually trying to kind of convert AngularJS apps to Angular, and Angular does help with that. There are some tools available within Angular to, for example, have an Angular app but with an AngularJS module inside, but still use the new Angular router, for example. There are all kinds of tools available. In my experience, it depends on the size of the AngularJS app. If it's a huge app, I can imagine that you want to migrate slowly to new Angular. If it's an app less than 10,000 lines of code, I wouldn't bother. I would just rebuild it completely from scratch in Angular because it is a nightmare. I've tried it on a few apps just as a proof of concept to prove to my customer it's probably not a good idea. And he agreed it's not a good idea. So we are now, we're doing let's say one app a month now for the next 10 months or so, and actually just rebuilding the app completely in new Angular. I mean, the problem with migrating is that you always will end up with old AngularJS code, helpers, additional CSS frameworks, little npm imports, and they will be stuck in your new app for ages before you can clean them out, right? Because there will become a point when you do the migration, there will be a point where you're afraid to touch your application because you're afraid things will break. And that's not a good situation to be in. So my advice, if you can, just use the old AngularJS app as an example, but just rebuild it completely new in Angular. I mean, trust me on this. That's my advice. I don't know if Santosh has any good experiences in migrating from AngularJS to Angular. I don't.
Thank you very much, Satosh.
Yeah, so I mean the last framework which I built when I was in the bank when I used to work for the bank. So before that we actually had an Angular JS framework, and the code was pathetic. So the first impression when my manager said, let's migrate this, or let's use some way to upgrade this code to the new framework, I said, okay, it's better to just delete the existing code and write a new one. Because in Angular JS, like it was I'm not criticizing any framework or library, but in React JS, you know, right, there are 10 different ways to do the same thing, and the same thing was with Angular JS. You can just go ahead and write the code view the way you want. And I would say the earlier framework which was written in Angular JS, it was abused. So I said, okay, let's leave it aside and create a new framework so we can just write it in a better way, because the code was really old, maybe 2-3 years. It was written 2-3 years back, and it's like it was a playground. So whenever there was a new developer who used to come into the team, he just used to write some code which no one else understands, and they were trying to do the same thing in new framework as well. Then somehow I got in and I said, okay, stop writing this code because it's not applicable anymore. So there are two things. Of course, you should migrate, but you should also think about your developers that they are not writing Angular JS code still. So
Yeah.
that was my experience.
Thank you very much, Santosh. Thank you very much. So basically, it's a funny experience. I'll put it that way. Funny experience, interesting one, and uh, one thing I also point out from what you all said is that it's also, if it's a small application, and maybe you've been working with Angular JS, probably you want to learn Angular. I think it will be a way for you to look at that and work on Angular as a whole as you move on. That way you have something you're referring to what your project should do, and you don't need to go on writing a whole new application because you already have one running, and you can use the Angular itself to grow on your skills. So if it's a nightmare, as like some of us point out, it's also a way for you to learn when you are building. So thank you guys. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question, which is now this is what I want us to move a bit advanced now to using other external packages like NGRX. And or before that, one other question that will take us to NGRX, and I want us to run this over because we are almost an hour, is using observables. There was a question here that asked how to handle observables in Angular. Now, the interesting thing about this question is, even on my side, I feel there's this practice that says, okay, you need to subscribe but unsubscribe, or you need to use piping and all those interesting features. Which is better and easier way have you all tried to implement this?
So I didn't completely get the question, Hassan. Sorry.
Okay, the question is on observables, using
Right.
observables with Angular. Now that's the question. But I was also in my own experience with observables in Angular, and what others always pointed out. I'm sure I'm clear because okay. So what others also pointed out is you see it's subscribed and unsubscribed on observable, or use the piping, and that's pipe,
Right.
async pipe to work with observables. So which is the easier, better way, and how have you all worked with this?
Right. Shall I or?
Please go on. Michael, please go on.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, I'm a big fan of observables, and I'm a big fan of reactive coding. Right. So because I train a lot of C# developers sometimes to actually build Angular applications, but also other junior developers. The concept of streaming and reactive programming are pretty difficult, but the advantages you get of using observables and streams for almost everything in your Angular app is huge. Once you get used to it, it is fantastic. So if you look at a few basic rules while building an Angular app, and those are not fixed rules, right? So it depends on the app, and it depends on the components and the size of the component. But what you ideally want to see is the least amount of possible of subscriptions inside your component, right? The least amount of component scoped variables. What I see a lot in beginner code basically is that people get that you have to subscribe to an observable. So what I see in ng on init is a whole list of observables that are being subscribed to, and then the result of that observable is set to a component scoped variable, right? That's a lot of people do this, and this works. It is okay-ish, right? But then if you go a step further, you also see that all those subscriptions are not unsubscribed on destroy. Really important, right? So, okay, so the basic rule is if you can combine streams in your component and async subscribe to it in your view, right? That is always good advice, because the async subscription in your view is automatically unsubscribed, right? So you don't have to think about subscriptions, but it also keeps your code much more lean and mean, because if you start combining those streams, for example, you have I don't even use click handlers anymore. So event handlers for a click, I try to prevent them, right? So I just use a subject for that, and next to subject in my view, so I can combine that with other data I might need when something is clicked using our ArcGIS operators. So really, observables are, I mean, everything in Angular is built around observables. I also still see a lot of people who, well, any observable they encounter in Angular, they do a to-promise on, and they start working with promises again. It's possible, but you don't get the advantages of observables then. So yeah, I mean, try to use as much streams as possible. Try to subscribe the least amount of possible in your component. It's not a problem. Sometimes you have to subscribe in your component. It's not a problem. If you have to subscribe in your component, make sure you also destroy that subscription in the ng on destroy. Yeah, and try to use as much of the very smart and very cool and handy operators that ArcGIS supplies. You don't even have to know that many of them. I mean, there are dozens of them. On a daily basis, I might use 6 or 7 maybe. And sometimes for niche cases, I have to look another one up, and I actually have to look it up because I can't remember it again. I know it exists. So yeah, I mean, observables are fantastic. Once you get used to it, there's no more race conditions in your code because everything just updates automatically for you. It's fantastic. That's my opinion.
I would like to add one more thing from my personal experience over here. So when I started using Observable, I didn't know the correct way to unsubscribe, and also to how to unsubscribe and why to unsubscribe. So it runs into the performance issues if you don't unsubscribe your observables. So please make sure that once when you are subscribing, unsubscribe it. So I would say observables are a double-edged sword. It can harm your applications also, and it can give benefits to your application also. So if you cannot handle it in a proper way, then it will harm your application. But if you can handle it in a proper way, then your application will be super smooth and super effective.
I mean, if you are expecting some answer from my side, async pipe for the win. So I always use async pipe. I don't like to unsubscribe in my ng on distro.
Well, there are some scenarios, right?
Yeah,
that you have to subscribe to your components.
Yeah, exactly. For example, value changes, right? If I am
that's a big one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you guys. This is so much. I must say this is a masterclass on its own. This is a masterclass. Thank you so much. One other question. So one other now I want us to, because I want it as it is. It's moving from basic to a bit mid more. Now I'm moving on to trying to see how the questions that we have here working with NGRX. Now on NGRX, the general question here about NGRX is one thing is how to, well, basically what I get here is a basic understanding on NGRX. Is for the first question is Redux or NGRX, and why use this in Angular if possible. Try give some examples. The other NGRX question we ask here is how to ensure that particular feature effects can be accessed by every other feature. That's sharing services, NGRX services. So basically the question is about NGRX, using NGRX or Redux, or also sharing the effects.
Yeah, I think Michael is the one guy who can actually answer this question. He's been working on NGRX from a long time, and you can see his background.
Guy, yeah.
Yeah, and especially you can see his background.
Yes,
private store. So
Santosh, you are an NGRX expert.
No. Yeah, I'm referring to your background.
Yes,
can you read that?
Yeah, I can read that.
I can read that. So,
yeah,
Michael, please. Give us the open the floor.
I'm a huge. I'm actually quite a huge fan of NGRX, but only for the right projects, right? But because I do a lot of enterprise large applications with loads of data, NGRX is really good. So and actually because I'm so familiar now with NGRX and it gives me so much advantages in coding, I'm actually now slowly starting to use it for smaller projects as well, because it's so easy to just slap it in and use it, right? So when would you need NGRX? Well, whenever you need to keep state for across multiple routes, for example, there are some rules. So on NGRX IO, there are some checklists. When do you need, or when might you need NGRX? So if you need to share states, for example, in the applications I build, I have a lot of multi-stage, multi-component, multi-routing forms, right? So really, really complicated long forms that gets loaded from API calls initially with default values or values that were entered earlier. And then you have to go step by step by step, right? So you can easily solve that by just having a shared service that stores the form state for you. But I like to use NGRX for it, right? So state management, right? Anything that lives quite a long time in your app and that has data, primarily data maybe that you got from APIs and you need to use later on and might be updated on the fly, maybe by WebSockets, or I'm using a lot of Signal R to actually live update data in the background. I don't have to worry about that data anymore. My data view is really simple. I have a selector on NGRX, and if that data, for whatever reason, updates, maybe because a socket message comes in, or maybe because of a user interaction in a form or something, the selector just triggers again. Again, we have these nice observables here, right? So yeah, I'm a big fan of NGRX. I'm now working on the pet project of mine. It's a fairly simple site, but I'm making it a bit more complex than it should be, probably because I like it. I also use NGRX there. Love the product. But there are many other ways of doing it, right? So if you have a smaller site, using a service with some behavior subjects might be much more efficient than using the entire scope of NGRX. NGRX is huge, although it doesn't add that much to your bundle size, I must admit, because it's pretty efficient in tree shakeable. But yeah, there is a new API service you have to teach yourself, and it has a bit of a steep learning curve in the beginning to understand what exactly is going on. Plus, and Brandon Roberts is going to hate me for this, there's quite a lot of boilerplate to set it up, right? So, yeah, besides all the negative points, I love NGRX. Try it out if you have a larger app with a lot of data, and you won't be disappointed. So this was the marketing. The marketing.
Actually,
Yeah,
Brandon
I
is
will
going to
agree
hate you
with
for
you.
mentioning boilerplates.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I will
Ankit,
agree.
go on.
I agree with Mikkel on this. Actually, even I suggest that we should use NGRX when we have a lot of components and we want to maintain the state across multiple components. Because using it inside a smaller application would be an overkill. Because as he suggested, there is a lot of boilerplate while setting up the NGRX. So your NGRX code will be bigger than your actual component code, which does not make any sense if you have a small application. So that is why if you have a huge application which like 50, 60, or even 100 components, in that case, NGX would be a better option to maintain the state.
Yeah.
So just to make one thing clear, I love NGRX, and people generally relate NGRX to state management, right? So it's not that much. I mean, NGRX is shaping now, so you might have heard about few other libraries being added. So it's like more of NGRX is the extension for writing reactive code in Angular. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, Michael Heldaki He's
Yeah.
added some cool some
Nginx
cool libraries.
components.
Yeah,
Yay.
Nginx component. And tonight at 11:30 p.m. IST, myself, Brendan Roberts, Alex, we are going to discuss about a new API called NGRX component. So it will be the component API for managing your state, but only to your component. So a component which manages its own state. So there is a new library which Alex is working on, and we are going to discuss about it 11:30 p.m. IST. And I'm just sharing the live stream link in chat. So if you're interested and you want to provide some feedback, you can just chip in. And because I'm very bad at naming, so I cannot suggest them what name to use. But if you are good at it, of course, come and help us. And
Yeah.
the other question you had, yeah, other question you had, right? Redux or NGRX. So if you are coming to Angular, please don't use Redux. I think it will just add extra complexity to your application. Use something like NGRX, NGXS, or Akita, which is native Angular native, and it's like tree shakeable. Everything is available. You don't have to do anything extra, right? So I would prefer not to use Redux, but use something which is available as part of Angular ecosystem.
Okay, so thank you, guys, thank you all. I can't believe the time has run into 1 hour. I can't believe that. Seriously, this is fun. This is amazing. But just to give us a little roundup, there are a few one or two questions in the chat section of YouTube, which I will want if while we are rounding up, we can all browse through all those questions. But also that we are going to this is going to move into where we will get a dedicated section for engineers, because I can see it's really large, and there are lots. That's one interesting thing about Angular. Angular has so many open space we can all dive into and learn more about it. We have other questions here like about RxJS. We have questions about IV engine, which I feel it's something we should move to, because IV is the new kid in town.
Yeah.
IV engine is the new kid in town. I don't know if it's something we can use that few minutes to all just talk about, and also use that few minutes to give little links out there you want our community to listen, watch, or read. So I
Yeah.
want us to move on to talking about IV engine, because there are about 3 to 2 questions in the in the section there about IV.
Okay, so of course, IV is really big, right? And uh, I mean, it will take another 1 hour to discuss about IV. But I would suggest there is another talk which is happening at in 30 minutes. Okay, and there are two experts, Martina Cross and uh, Siddharth Ajmera. So they both are going to talk about IV for an hour and 30 minutes. So I would suggest, rather than discussing it here, just jump onto that meetup, and you will of course get more to learn rather than just getting your answer in 5 minutes. So this is what I suggest.
Good
And
advice.
maybe some.
I will add one more thing here. Ivy has made our life easier as an Angular developer. One of the thing is that upgrading from Angular 8 to Angular 9 is very easy. I was thinking that once Ivy come, they are changing the entire compiler techniques. So I don't know what will happen. I was very afraid, but the upgrading was very good. The implementation of Ivy is very good. So we should commend the Angular team to do this in a very clean manner. So that is one of the very good thing. And also it has provided some new features, so that is good. And it has made our life easier as an Angular developer. That is one thing. And surely we will join the talk which Santosh was talking about in 30 minutes. Let me see the clock. Okay, I will also join in 30 minutes.
Oh, interesting. So, which I will find this to be where we quickly round up. And please, I will give you guys access to the lots bulk of questions we have there, and also the ones we have on the chat. You can all reach out to. I'll share your Twitter handles where they can reach out to you with them with all our community via email. Those who have submitted their email. If you haven't, you can click a link I will share now and share your email, or even follow them on Twitter. We're all on Twitter. As we run this up, we will all mention our Twitter handle, and I'll also share it with you on the chat. Or you can all just put your Twitter handle in the chat so that the community can follow you and always reach out to you whenever we have these kind of questions. Again, my name is Asansani. I'm the moderator, and this has been an interesting out of my, I never expected it to be this fun. Seriously, I wanted it to be knowledgeable and fun, but this much fun was was not anticipated for, and this much knowledge from you guys. Truly, truly, I appreciate this moment, and I would really, really love to do more of this with you guys. Please give us a little introduction about you as we round this up, and next time we'll do more about this, please.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Hassan, for having us. It was a great time. 1 hour, as you said, it's very fast. 1 hour but it was a very fun session. We should do it more often. Maybe once a month will be great. It is easy to connect with people, and it's great fun to answer all the questions from the developers.
Yeah.
Thank you
you
for
very
having
much.
us.
Thank you.
So just
So sad. Really
Hassan,
fun for me.
just to add one more thing, and the fun part about this talk was, right. The fun part was Mikhail finally changed his profile pic, so we know how he looks like.
Yes, exactly. Thank
So
you, bro.
I've been following him from last 1 year on Twitter, and when I saw his original picture, I was like, okay, he's another guy.
Yeah.
Easy, thank you. When I saw when you shared the picture with me, I was like, oh,
No,
wow,
right?
this.
Yeah.
My hair is longer than normal now, and my beard is
Yeah.
longer. My hairdresser is closed, so yeah,
Oh,
I know. I look different.
so this is
But
the
great.
lockdown look.
Yeah, lockdown look. Yeah.
Yeah, lockdown look is a great phrase.
It's a great one. It's really a great one. So, Michael, Santosh, Ankit, I hope that you are staying safe, you're staying home, and this difficult times that we are doing so much. Thank you very much for at this time that you are actually helping the community, contributing back to the community, sharing your knowledge. Really appreciate this. And to everybody watching, we hope you're staying safe. We hope that you learn a lot, and we will find a way to get back to your questions. Ankit, you have a special question for you in the chat that says that you have a special question.
Yeah,
in the chat.
I just checked that. But it is not clear. So that's why I'm
Okay.
posting a reply.
Okay, I'm
I am
sure
posting a reply.
you can get back and interact more about that. And
Yeah.
as we run this up, and thank you very much, guys. It's really I can't even say how much I really appreciate this. It's really means so much.
Hassan,
Thank you.
Hassan is
for
very
having us.
excited.
Yes, I really would love to do this another time. Really would love to.
Yeah.
Maybe we use that to focus on NGRX and other aspects of Angular. Thank you so
Yes.
much. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
it would
another
be great
time,
to have. Yeah.
I'll be ending the meeting now, and thank you again.
Yeah.
I'm saying this so much. That means I'm so excited about this. All right, bye
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye all.
Bye bye.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you for joining.
Mhm.